The cub didn't see the danger. He was too busy chasing a dragonfly, laughing in the shallow water, his white fur splattered with mud. But just beyond the reeds, 5 predators waited, silent, calculated, hungry. What they didn't know was that something else was watching too, something far more dangerous and far more merciful. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. The morning air in Echo Valley, Wyoming, held the breath of late autumn, crisp, dry, and laced with the faint scent of pine and dew-kissed soil. Nestled between the rising ridges of the Bridger-Teton National Forest, the valley stretched wide with golden meadows and towering evergreens. Shafts of sun broke through the cloud-dappled sky, painting soft light across the winding gravel path that led to the Monroe Ranger Station. The weathered cabin, framed by birch trees, stood resilient in the clearing, its wood darkened by years of wind and weather, but warm with the quiet hum of life inside. Clara Monroe stood outside the station, adjusting the strap of her ranger pack, a thermos of coffee in one hand and a notepad tucked into her jacket pocket. At 34, Clara carried the presence of someone older, not in age, but in weight. Her frame was lean and strong from years of hiking the back trails, her skin sun-brushed with faint freckles across her high cheekbones. Her eyes were a steady shade of hazel, the kind that scanned the world rather than simply looked at it. She wore her brown hair in a loose braid that often fell out during patrols. Clara didn't smile often, but when she did, it was honest and rare enough to feel like sunlight breaking through mist. She had once been a student of wildlife biology with dreams of studying big cats in the African savanna, but after the sudden death of her parents in a car accident 8 years prior, she returned to Wyoming to care for her younger brother, Lucas. The tragedy had rooted her in Echo Valley, where she became a ranger not out of ambition, but out of quiet duty. The land gave her structure, the silence comfort, but beneath that calm exterior was a fierce protector of her family, of the forest, and of everything voiceless within it. From inside the cabin, the sound of light shuffling and a camera lens clicking against wood signaled the presence of Lucas Monroe. He was 28, taller than Clara, but slightly hunched, as if always trying to make himself smaller. His hair was a soft blonde, messy, and long enough to fall into his eyes. Since returning from a 2-year military deployment overseas, Lucas had been different, quieter, withdrawn. He rarely left the cabin, spoke in short phrases, and spent most days organizing old gear or staring out the window with a blank expression. Lucas hadn't picked up a camera in years, but today Clara had gently placed his old Canon on the windowsill next to a thermos of mint tea. She hadn't said a word, just smiled, nodded toward the forest, and left it there. She was 2 miles into her patrol, boots crunching over a path covered in fallen needles, when she noticed them. Prints in the soft earth beside the creek trail. They were round, larger than a bobcat, but not quite cougar. Clara crouched low, brushing a finger through the fresh imprint. The claws were faint, barely extended, not canine, not bear. Feline, she murmured, narrowing her eyes, but not native. She straightened slowly and scanned the nearby foliage. Birds called from the trees, and a light breeze rustled the grass, but the air held that peculiar stillness Clara had learned to trust, the kind that whispered, "You're not alone." Further up the trail, unaware of the watchful ranger nearby, a small creature padded through the underbrush. Aspen, the white lion cub, was no more than 3 months old. His coat shimmered like moonlight, tinged faintly with dust and dew. His ears twitched with every new sound, his eyes wide with curiosity. Separated from his mother during a violent thunderstorm that had swept through the region days ago, Aspen had wandered far from where he'd last scented her. But he was not afraid, not yet. The world, to him, was still one great adventure. He chased grasshoppers, he swatted at leaves. His large paws made him clumsy, tumbling over rocks and shrubs, but every stumble ended in a playful grunt. He was drawn to a flutter of blue wings, a dragonfly dancing over a shallow puddle. Entranced, Aspen pounced, missed, and pounced again. He giggled in the way young animals do, somewhere between sound and movement. But beyond the trees, in the dappled shadows beneath a crag of stone, 5 sets of eyes followed his every move. A pack of spotted hyenas, gaunt and hungry from a dry season, crouched low in the grass. Their bodies were lean but powerful, their coats mottled with scars and burrs. The largest among them, a female with a torn ear, licked her jaws. They made no sound, not yet. Only patience. Back at the ranger station, Lucas sat on the porch steps, the camera in his lap. He turned the lens in his hands, tracing the edges like one might a memory. Clara's quiet encouragement, the cool weight of the camera, and the feel of wind on his face, it all stirred something. Slowly, he raised the camera and looked through the viewfinder. The forest was still. But he clicked once, then again. Something began to return. Back in the woods, Clara followed the tracks deeper into the valley. She found claw marks on a tree trunk, too low for an adult predator. Droppings nearby confirmed it. This was no native cougar. It was younger, lighter, likely alone. She scribbled a note in her pad. Unidentified feline juvenile, white fur, possibly exotic escapee, will investigate further. The breeze carried a rustle, then faint, irregular. She froze. Not the movement of wind, but something alive. Her eyes flicked upward just as she saw it, a blur of pale fur darting between trees, too small to be a threat, but something about its grace, the shimmer of its coat. Aspen, she whispered, the name coming from nowhere, unbidden but fitting, like a word the forest had whispered into her ear. Far ahead, Aspen chased the dragonfly into a sunlit clearing, unaware of the shadows that followed him. The hyenas crept closer. The game was almost over, but Clara was already moving again, boots silent on the forest floor. And Lucas, from the ridge above with camera in hand, caught a flicker of white below and lifted his lens, unaware that the frame he was about to capture would change everything. The fog rolled in like breath from an ancient beast, soft yet chilling, and thickened over the grassy floor of Echo Valley by late afternoon. What had begun as a clear autumn day had turned hushed and dim, as if the trees themselves had secrets to keep. The distant ridges blurred beneath the mist, and the tall grass moved with an eerie stillness, undisturbed by wind but charged with something else, something watching. Aspen, the white lion cub, was oblivious to it all. His world was still an open canvas, untouched by fear. He had followed a dragonfly, brilliant blue and flickering like living light out of the deeper woods. The chase had taken him far from the grove where he'd spent the morning chewing on sticks and rolling through moss. Now, he found himself near the edge of a wide, muddy basin, fringed with yellowed reeds and scattered stones. It wasn't the kind of place his instincts, still half asleep, knew to avoid. To him, it was simply new. He crouched and pounced, front paws smacking the shallow water, sending muddy droplets into the air. He squeaked with delight and did it again, his pale fur quickly spotted with dirt. The dragonfly danced higher, then vanished entirely into the mist. Aspen paid no mind. The water was a new game now, but the grass behind him rustled, not with the wind, but with breath and purpose. 5 shadows emerged one by one, slow and deliberate. Spotted coats, sloping backs, and eyes that didn't blink. The hyenas had arrived. The leader, a battle-worn female with one torn ear, moved first. Her belly sagged with hunger, her steps low and predatory. The others fanned out behind her, forming a crescent along the edges of the clearing. Their teeth showed not in smiles but in silence. There was no need for laughter now. The kill was close. They could taste it. Aspen froze, his paw still resting in the water. Then the silence shifted. The stillness in the air no longer felt curious, it felt wrong. He turned slowly. His eyes, round and uncertain, met the advancing shapes. The torn-eared female snarled low, and the others followed suit. Aspen bolted. His paws slipped in the mud. He scrambled forward, water splashing behind him. Panic turned him clumsy. His ears flattened. His heart pounded wildly in his chest, but he didn't cry out. The sounds came from behind, paws thudding, snarls growing louder, sharper. The edge of the trees was too far. His legs weren't fast enough. Then came the roar. It didn't echo. It shook. The very fog seemed to pull back, as if retreating from something ancient and powerful. Birds launched from unseen branches. The hyenas halted, their bodies going stiff, muscles coiled but suddenly unsure. Even Aspen skidded to a stop, his body low to the ground. From the far side of the clearing, where the mist thickened around cedar trunks, a figure emerged. Massive, deliberate. His mane was dark amber, tangled by wind and years. His eyes burned gold, focused like a blade. His body, broad and built like stone, moved without haste. He wasn't charging, he wasn't threatening, he was simply there, and that was enough. The hyenas shifted. Two took a step back. The torn-eared female growled in defiance but didn't advance. Her eyes locked on the lions as he came forward and placed himself between them and the cub. He didn't look back at Aspen. He didn't need to. The roar came again, deeper this time, vibrating through the bones of the earth. The standoff lasted seconds, though it felt longer. The hyenas, faced with something they could not measure, broke. First one, then the rest, slinked backward into the tall grass and vanished. The torn-eared female was the last to go, her pride heavy in her shoulders. Silence returned. The lion, this ghostly protector, stood unmoving for a moment longer. Then he lowered his head, exhaled softly, and sat in the mud beside Aspen, who had curled his paws beneath himself, trembling but watching. Up above the basin, from a ridge barely visible through the fog, the shutter of a camera clicked. Lucas Monroe hadn't intended to go far from the cabin. After Clara left for her patrol, he had wandered, camera in hand, almost without thinking. Something in the air, something about the quality of light, had drawn him to higher ground. He'd seen the cub first, a flash of pale fur like snowfall against the autumn backdrop. He'd raised the camera. Then, when the hyenas appeared, his hands had gone cold. And when the lion stepped through the trees, he had stopped breathing altogether. Now he stared through the lens at the scene below. A small white lion cub curled like a question mark in the grass. And beside him, the great lion, silent and still as stone. The image burned into his memory, and into his chest. He lowered the camera and sat down heavily on the damp ridge, elbows on his knees, breath slow and uneven. That roar had stirred something he hadn't felt in years. Safety. When he was 11, Lucas had fallen into a river during a hiking trip with their father. The current had dragged him under. He remembered thrashing, choking on icy water, and the blur of shapes above. Someone had pulled him out, a stranger who disappeared before anyone could thank him. The memory had blurred with time, but the feeling had not. That roar just now. It felt the same. Down below, the fog thickened again, drawing its veil around the clearing. The lion turned, glanced toward the ridge just once, and then back toward the cub, who now rested his head on the earth and closed his eyes. Lucas raised the camera again, clicked one more frame, and whispered to no one. "Who are you?" The fog had begun to thin, drifting up and away in ghostly ribbons by the time Clara Monroe reached the outer grove near Hollow Ridge. The earth was still damp, and the air held that quiet tension, like the forest was waiting. Clara moved slowly, her boots barely making sound on the pine-covered ground. Her trained eyes swept over every detail. She had tracked the footprints for over an hour, 2 distinct sets, one light, young, hesitant, the other massive, deliberate, and deep. She crouched now at the base of an old spruce tree, pressing her palm beside one of the prints in the soil. It was feline, clearly, but far too large for anything native to Echo Valley. Even mountain lions didn't leave imprints this wide or stride with such weight. The smaller prints moved alongside, weaving erratically like a child chasing shadows. Together, they told a story. And Clara had seen enough stories written in dirt to know this one didn't end in violence. Not yet. The wind stirred above, sifting light through thinning clouds. Then came a sound, a low rustle, not close but not far. She followed it, silent as breath. In the shallow basin beyond the ridge, hidden beneath the shade of cedar and stone, Clara saw them. The white cub sat curled near the edge of a hollow stump, his small body tucked tightly, tail twitching softly. Just behind him, almost blending into the shadows, sat the lion. Massive, still. His amber mane fluttered faintly in the breeze. He wasn't crouched to strike. He wasn't looming in dominance. He was simply there, watching, waiting. And Clara froze. She stood at the edge of the trees, half shielded by brush, her hand resting near her flare holster out of instinct, but she didn't draw it. Her instincts didn't scream danger. They whispered reverence. The great lion turned his head slightly, as if sensing her, but he didn't rise. His eyes did not challenge, they acknowledged. And then, slowly, he shifted his gaze back to the cub. Clara didn't move. She didn't speak. Something in her gut, in the marrow of her bones, told her this was no ordinary encounter. This was a story unfolding that wasn't hers to interrupt. Back at the ranger cabin, Lucas sat cross-legged on the floor, camera pieces spread around him like the contents of an old memory box. He was cleaning the lens, carefully, methodically, as if the act would reveal not just clarity in glass but in thought. On the desk beside him lay the printed photo from earlier, the lion standing between Aspen and the hyenas, the mist swirling around them like theater curtains mid-scene. He stared at it often. Then he spoke. "I had a friend in my unit," Lucas said, voice low, not looking up. Name was Jonah Beckett. Laughed too much, smoked too much. But he could hear trouble before it started. We called him Ghost. Clara, seated at the small table nearby with a mug of tea, turned slightly. She said nothing. She'd learned that silence was the best way to keep Lucas talking. "One night," he continued, "our convoy got hit outside Kandahar, a chaos, screams, dirt in your teeth. And Beckett, he pulls me out. I'd frozen, just couldn't move. He pulled me behind cover, took a bullet for it." Clara's fingers tightened slightly around her cup. "I never got to say thank you," Lucas said. "Never got to ask why me." He looked over at the photo again. "But that lion? Today it felt the same." Clara stood and moved to the counter, setting her cup down. She pulled open a drawer and removed a stack of worn Polaroids, images of the forest, old trail cams, wildlife snapshots. She laid them on the table one by one, creating a slow path that led from the cabin toward the woods. "What are you doing?" Lucas asked. "Building you a way back," she said simply. "You used to say the forest made more sense through a lens, so we'll start here, a photo at a time." Lucas looked at the trail of images, simple pictures, nothing extraordinary, but each one was a step. "I don't know if I can go back out there," he said. "You don't have to," Clara replied, "but the forest can still come to you, if you're willing to see it." Outside, the light shifted as evening crept in. Back in the basin, the white cub stirred. He stood on unsteady legs, nuzzling the lion's leg. Major, though Clara didn't yet know his name, lowered his massive head and bumped the cub gently with his nose. No growl, no command, just presence. And then the sound returned, the dry shuffle of paws, heavier now. Clara stiffened. Across the clearing, shadows emerged again. The hyenas. They came slow this time, cautious, but hungrier. Clara reached instinctively for her flare, but stopped when she saw the lion rise. Major didn't charge. He stepped forward, shoulders rolling with grace and power, placing himself once more between the cub and the danger. His mane bristled in the wind, eyes locked on the intruders. The torn-eared female snarled, but stayed back. The others fanned out, testing the edges. But Major didn't move again. He didn't need to. And Clara understood. This wasn't territory. This wasn't instinct. This was guardianship, and it wasn't hers to challenge. She slipped back into the brush, silent, retreating the way she had come, letting the scene remain untouched. Later, when she returned to the cabin, she said nothing at first. She walked to Lucas's wall and added a single photograph she'd taken days before, of the fog lifting over the ridge. Lucas looked up. "What's that one called?" Clara smiled faintly. "Something's watching." He nodded. And outside in the darkness, the trees whispered. The late afternoon sun slanted low across Echo Valley, casting long golden shadows that stretched across the forest floor like reaching arms. The wind had picked up, whispering through the tall pines, tugging at leaves and fur alike. It was the kind of breeze that carried change in it, something shifting beneath the quiet. Clara Monroe stood on a rocky ridge above Hollow Basin, one hand gripping the edge of her flare launcher, the other shielding her eyes from the glare reflecting off the valley below. The air tasted metallic. Her instincts prickled. She had been tracking the cub again, Aspen, watching from afar over the last few days, keeping careful distance from the lion that now guarded him like a silent sentry. There was something sacred between them she couldn't explain, but something in her gut today told her things were no longer balanced. Down in the clearing, Aspen was padding between the trees, his movements more confident than before, but still unaware of what moved just beyond the curtain of grass. His white coat was flecked with dry mud, and his ears twitched curiously as he paused to sniff the wind. Then the sound came, a low, rhythmic rustle, then silence, then another. From 3 different directions, they were circling. From the north, east, and west, the hyenas moved not in chaos this time, but with structure, purpose. Their lean bodies kept low, their eyes narrowed. The torn-eared female led them again, her gait commanding and efficient. She had learned. This time, it would not be a frontal assault, it would be a trap. Aspen froze. He sensed it. He turned, bolted, his small paws thudding against the earth. The hyenas quickened pace, their formation tightening like a noose. But the cub was no longer alone. From the shadows beneath a blackened oak came a low growl. It rolled out like thunder before the storm. And then, from the east, Major emerged, not charging, not roaring, but moving like an ancient wave of force, his presence enough to halt even the boldest predator. He stepped between Aspen and the torn-eared female just as she lunged. Teeth clashed. Dust rose, and from the west ridge a sharp whistle split the air. Then a red bloom of light streaked through the sky. The flare exploded just feet above the clearing, and the valley lit up in blood-orange glow. Clara stood beneath the smoke, her stance wide, a second flare in hand. Her eyes were calm, focused, but the message was clear. They were not alone. Not anymore. The hyenas hesitated. Major held ground, his mane bristling in the sudden light. Aspen stayed crouched, watching. Then something broke the tension entirely. A sound, raw, human, and unearthly, pierced the air. It wasn't a roar, nor a scream, but a sharp, high-pitched whoop, almost animalistic in its ferocity. It echoed off the canyon walls and sent birds scattering from the canopy. The hyenas recoiled, confused, alarmed. From the southern slope, a figure appeared, running. Lucas Monroe, his camera still strapped to his chest, barreled through the underbrush like a man half-mad. He wore a khaki jacket too big for him and mismatched boots, one unlaced. His hair was wind-blown, and his face flushed with both fear and something else, fury. He didn't stop. He ran straight toward the clearing, and as he ran, he whooped again, louder, rawer. The hyenas lost their rhythm. They turned in on themselves, uncertain now, apex predator at the front, fire in the sky above, and a wild human charging at full speed. The torn-eared female snapped at one of her own. That broke them. They fled. One by one, tails between legs, the pack disappeared into the tall grass, their plans undone. For a long beat, no one moved. Then Aspen let out a small sound, not quite a mule, but something close to relief. Major lowered his head slowly, his eyes scanning each direction before settling on the human, now panting at the edge of the clearing. Clara came down the ridge behind him, boots crunching the gravel path, her steps deliberate and steady. Lucas looked up as she approached, his chest still heaving. "Did you see that?" "I did," she said softly, lowering her flare. They turned toward the lion, who now stood still, calm but alert. Aspen stepped closer to him, brushing his side. Major didn't move. Lucas raised his camera, not to shoot, but to hold it up, slowly, like a gesture of peace. "May I?" he asked, more to the air than to anyone in particular. Major blinked once, slow and heavy. Lucas pressed the shutter. Once. That moment would be the beginning of 100 others. Back at the cabin that night, Clara laid a new map across the table. It was marked not with hiking trails, but story points, moments she and Lucas had tracked and witnessed over the past few weeks. Photos were pinned beside each point, the first threads of something bigger than observation. Lucas sat across from her, flipping through the printed images, blurred pause in motion, the flare's arc, the lion's stare. His fingers trembled only slightly now. Clara handed him a clean, leather-bound notebook. "You're not just a witness anymore," she said. Lucas looked at her, his voice steadier than it had been in years. "Then what am I?" "A storyteller," she said, "for those who don't speak our language." He nodded once. "I think I'm ready." And as the valley outside slipped into a cold and silent night, a young white lion curled beneath the stars, safe once more beneath the silent breath of pine and sky. And somewhere not too far away, the great lion watched the darkness, not as a hunter, but as a guardian. The first snowfall came softly, like a whispered promise. Echo Valley had exchanged its golden autumn shawl for a white blanket that muffled every sound beneath its gentle weight. Pines stood tall beneath the frost, their branches draped in silence. From the ridge overlooking Hollow Basin, the land looked still, like the world had finally exhaled. Clara Monroe stood in that silence, her breath visible in the cold morning air, eyes scanning the horizon one last time. Beside her, Lucas adjusted the strap of his camera bag, his coat now worn from use, and his shoulders no longer hunched inward. He stood taller, clearer, like the snow had not just quieted the valley but settled something within him too. Down below, nestled near the old ranger's shelter, now converted into a protected enclosure, Aspen paced slowly. The white lion cub had grown taller in just a few months, his legs stronger, his eyes brighter. His fur gleamed against the frost like light carved into muscle, though still young. There was a calm in him now that hadn't existed before, and Major was gone. He had disappeared in the early days of winter one morning, after circling the edge of the enclosure. He had paused near the tree line. Clara had watched from a distance as Aspen tried to follow. Major had nudged him back gently, not with force but with finality. Then he had looked up toward Clara. It wasn't a stare, it was something softer, an unspoken exchange between two guardians. His gaze lingered a moment longer, then he turned and walked into the forest, his massive form dissolving between snow-dusted trees. He had not returned. Clara didn't expect him to. That was the nature of wild things. They came when they were needed, and when they were not. They moved like wind into the next shadow that required protection. Weeks passed. Now, in the heart of January, Echo Valley held something new. Within the refurbished barn, a building that once stored tools and trail gear, Lucas stood before a crowd of about 25 people. The room was warm, a fire crackling softly in the stone hearth. Strings of soft lights looped between wooden beams. Locals had gathered, along with 3 veterans who had traveled from neighboring counties. There was even a young woman named Becca Sanderson, a school counselor from Jackson Hole, who had heard about the project and offered to help. Becca was short, with wavy brown hair and a laugh that came easily. She had once worked with children experiencing post-traumatic stress and had a calmness about her that put even the most guarded soul at ease. On the walls were the photographs, framed in reclaimed pine. Lucas's work, images of hoof prints in frost, a rabbit frozen mid-leap, a golden eagle stretching its wings over a snowy cliff. But the centerpiece, the one placed beneath the banner, "Silent Guardians of the Forest," was the moment he had captured without knowing its future weight. Aspen lying in the long shadow of Major, their bodies still but alert, the light filtering just enough to make it feel timeless. The room fell silent before it. Clara stood at the back, arms crossed lightly, watching not the crowd but Lucas, the way he introduced each image now, the way he told each story, not just about animals but about survival, trust, and unseen strength. "This photo," Lucas said softly, gesturing to the centerpiece, "was taken the moment I stopped seeing fear and started seeing connection. That lion didn't roar, he didn't chase, he just stood where no one else had, and in doing so, he gave that cub a chance." He paused, and in a way, he gave me one too. Applause didn't follow immediately. People just stood there for a while, breathing in the story. After the exhibit, Becca approached Clara near the window. "You said you were looking for someone to help expand the program here," she asked. Clara nodded. "Something quieter than a therapy center. More natural. We want to bring veterans out here, not to talk, but to be still, to feel again." Becca smiled. "That's what I do." Within 2 months, Echo Valley was no longer just a ranger station. It became something else, a sanctuary. There were small cabins built near the edge of the forest, intentionally without power. Trails marked not by signs, but by stones placed deliberately by those who had come before. At the center was the enclosure, where Aspen lived, now semi-free, roaming within the boundaries of safety. A creature of the wild who had chosen to stay. Veterans came quietly. They didn't talk much the first days, but Lucas guided them without words. He handed out cameras, invited long walks, let silence do its work, and often it was Aspen they gravitated toward. Something about his presence, his resilience, softened even the hardest edges. One evening, Clara stood by the old fire pit with Becca, now a fixture of the valley. A group of 3 veterans sat nearby, one of them gently brushing frost off the edge of a camera lens. "You ever wonder if Major's still out there?" Becca asked. Clara looked toward the trees, her eyes catching the last glint of sun on snow. "I don't have to wonder," she said quietly. "I know he is." The breeze shifted, and somewhere deep in the forest, far from human eyes, a silent guardian stood still beneath the trees, watching, waiting. Sometimes the most powerful miracles arrive not with noise, but with quiet courage. A lion who chose to protect rather than conquer. A cub who found strength not through might, but through love. A man who found healing in the stillness of nature. And a woman who listened not with fear, but with faith. In the heart of Echo Valley, we witnessed something sacred, how God often works through the unexpected, through the wild, through those who cannot speak our language but understand our souls. Sometimes his answer is not a voice, but a guardian in the mist, not a rescue we expect, but a path we didn't know we needed. This story is a gentle reminder that healing can come in many forms: a roar, a lens, a hand held out in silence. Whatever you are facing today, may you find your own Echo Valley, a place where peace meets you in the wilderness. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment below. Write Amen if you believe that even in the quietest corners. God is still watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories of love, healing, and faith. May God bless you and those you hold close.